My name is Chisara Glynn. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at HURST Accountants. And I want to start a series of discussions with various speakers, business leaders, particularly across the Northwest, to discuss really about the goings on in the world and particularly what's happened this year. And today I'm joined by Andrew Thorp, and I'd like Andrew to introduce yourself, if you can, please.
Well, Ches, it's great to be with you. We had a really nice chat the other day by way of a preliminary introduction to some of these themes. So it's great to sort of continue to expand that discussion. But I work as a speaker, a writer and a trainer in the field of what I describe as applied storytelling. So it's really a form of communication skills training where I'm helping people who are in influencing roles to be able to succeed or be more effective, because the things that they say and the way that they say them are better than they would have been before. So I give them a better story to tell and then teach them how to tell it well in different situations.
Mm-hmm. And today's theme, really, I'd like to ask you the topic of what makes a good leader. So it's quite an interesting topic, because we hear of so many variations of what's a leader, difference between a leader and a boss. So in your opinion, what makes a good leader, and can you give me an example of a good leader of our time?
Well, I think if we're talking about leaders on the public stage, often political leaders, my favourite leader of the moment is Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. I think she's absolutely terrific. If I could fashion an image of what a leader should be like, or a leader I'd like to have in charge of my country, it would be her. Because I think she exudes this sort of humanism. She's very human. She comes across as very normal and very accessible. She brought her young baby into the Parliament in New Zealand. I remember seeing on the news a little while ago. Yes. She appears on chat shows. She's very engaging. She's also got the skill of empathy, which I think is very important for a leader. And it was certainly on show in the aftermath of the Christchurch terrorist attack, which was the most horrendous tragedy to hit that country. And yet she was there, she had her arm around people, she was feeling what they were feeling, and yet giving them strength, by not sort of falling apart. She retained her strength and her composure, but she was obviously very, very moved and very touched by what people were going through in the aftermath of that incident. And I thought that was absolutely wonderful, the way that she handled that. But I just really I don't like bullies, Ches. I've always had a thing about, I don't like this sort of very alpha male concept of strength as a leader, where, there's lots of tough guy talk. I suppose maybe there's a feminine streak in me, perhaps, that I like leaders who are more empathetic, more human, have that sort of soft human touch, and yet are still able to have that strength and be seen as a respected leader and somebody who we can see to provide certainty in times of turbulence. Yeah. So she's my favorite.
And there's a lot to be said, actually, for women that have had a bullyish sort of tactic, especially, in business. So it isn't just men, really. Sometimes women feel that they have to take on that bullyish trait.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
think
But I
so.
mean, I also want to answer the question in relation to business, because I started by talking about, political leaders on the public stage, but
Mm,
obviously business leaders are working often on a more private setting. And I think that empathy is also very important in business leaders. But you're also, as a business leader, you are having to remind people all the time, your employees, of what's important. And sometimes the employees will not necessarily see things which the leader wants them to see as important, and they have to sort of set the tone and change the order of priority in which people see things. So people invariably will be very, very conscious of their tasks that they have to do, their daily tasks, to get through the tasks. But the leader has to remind people of why we're all here. Why are we doing this? Where
mm,
are we going? Why does our work matter? Why does the way that we do what we do, and the way that we communicate, and the way that we build relationships matter? So those things aren't necessarily the same as, focusing on the day-to-day tasks, but they are reminding people why those tasks actually have meaning, and why the way that we behave really, really matters. So this is more sort of strategic, higher level thinking, but not in the sense that it seems very abstract and distant. It's also got to relate to our daily work, but sort of setting it into a context that we can understand the bigger picture through our daily work.
yes. I think next year we're going to be, well, who knows what's going to happen. We've had the announcement about the furlough being extended until April 21. So there will be jobs and businesses supported in that aspect. What do you think it's going to be like for businesses, 2021? If you had a crystal ball, how do you think businesses should approach next year?
Well, I think we've still got to have that mindset of being adaptable, of
Mm,
showing resilience, because I don't think it will be a total transition to what it was like before. This phrase has become a cliche now, the new normal. What will the
mm,
new normal look like? I don't think it will be exactly the same as it was before. It sounds like COVID, will be living with COVID for some time. And
mm.
we just have to learn to adapt, and hopefully by being through mass vaccination, we can hopefully approach things with more confidence. But I think there will be more of a mix of face-to-face and virtual working. I don't think it will completely go back to face-to-face, because people have had a taste of virtual and have seen the advantages in
Yeah,
terms of the way that we can extend our net. We can do things like this without necessarily having to battle through a traffic jam to get to Manchester or Stockport or wherever we're going.
definitely.
Um, and that's great. The removal of the commute, the fact that we're spending less money now on travel and expenses and hotels and airplanes and so forth, air travel, has got to be a good thing. But I think that we do all miss, the face-to-face interaction, the sense of sharing a physical space. And I think that companies have been aware of the danger of sort of dislocation, of people feeling a bit distant from each other, and therefore not as glued together as they would have been if they were all working together in the same office.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been at HURST now for 5 weeks, and there's been a mixture of me working remotely, but also as well working in the office. And I've made a conscious decision to go into the office because, one, it helps me, because I'm new, and it gets to, I can get to grips with the structure of the business, and get to know new members of staff. But it's been really good because people have been able to reach out to me through, mechanisms like this,
Mm.
through Teams, and through Zoom. So It's been a really good challenge. You know, a mixed varied role.
Mm.
So I think we will see a lot of that next year. It will continue.
I think one of the things that we have to be careful of with virtual working is the trap that we can fall into, where it's so easy now to have a meeting and then do the next thing and then do the next thing with no travel in between, because we're just doing it in the same place. On the one hand, it's terribly convenient, but on the other hand, there is some value in that in between space.
Yes.
Because if you think about what we do during that transition from one thing to another and moving to a different place, we have time to reflect on the meeting we've just had. We have time to get geared up for the next thing that we're going to on that journey. We decompress on the way home after a busy day. It gives us a chance to sort of come down and separate the working day from what we're going to do at home.
Absolutely. You put your home hat on, your
yes.
family time.
Exactly. And the two sort of analogies or metaphors that I think work for this are, first of all, a brick wall has lots of bricks in it, but there's also mortar between the bricks. So if you think of the bricks as getting tasks done, you can't remove the mortar completely because the wall will fall down. Then you still need gaps between the bricks. And the other metaphor is when you're having a meal. When you finish your starter, you don't want your main course to immediately follow the starter after it's whisked away in a moment, because you want some space to just sort of talk about, oh, did you enjoy that, and have a little chat for a while before the next course comes along.
Exactly.
So if you squeeze out all of the in-between space, I think there's a trap that you can fall into, that you think you're being a lot more productive, but actually there's something lost if you remove and fill that space completely with just more work and more video calls.
That's very
so I think when we go back to the office and when we go back to physically meeting people, I think we will find that space comes back, but hopefully we'll start to appreciate what we can still do in that space. And obviously when we're in the office as well, a lot of that space is filled with banter and just chat about how did you get on at the weekend. And you can lean across to somebody when you're typing an email to a client and say, what do you think of this? Should I say like this, or should I use that phrase? So you can just bounce ideas off people in the moment. But when we're working from home, we almost have to plan these conversations. So you lose the impromptu, unplanned, could you just cast your eye over this, or overhearing someone having a conversation with a client can actually be a very helpful form of coaching. If you're learning your trade and listening to an experienced operator, just physically being next to them can be very helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I've taken it upon myself to be at the office at HURST, so I could sit next to, who I directly report to, because, I'll be able to have those discussions with Simon, and we can have that, the guidance of, the new structure, and to bounce ideas off each other, and, just for me to familiarize myself, with some of my projects. There's one question that I'm very interested. I want to ask you. People often, talk about the difference between a leader and a boss. In your opinion, what is the difference between a leader and a boss?
Okay. Well, I think they often talk about the difference between a leader and a manager. If that, I don't know if that's what you're getting at, because that's the way I would interpret that question. Because obviously a boss could still be seen as the leader, but I think in a lot of the time your immediate boss is usually your manager, and the leader can be a little bit distant. Obviously it depends on the size of the company. So if I frame this answer in the sense of the difference between a leader and a manager, it's probably easier for me to answer it. So I think a manager is often associated with control. It's managing a process. It's making sure that things work the right way that's been agreed. So you're following the procedure, you're doing things to an acceptable standard. It's about sort of controlling the level at which people are working and the outputs that they're generating. And in that sense, it can feel quite oppressive. It's quite, you feel as if you're always being judged all the time on an ongoing basis. And it can feel a little bit pressured. It depends on the relationship between the boss and the employee, of course. But I think a leader is much more to do with growth. So it's growth of the company, it's growth of the reputation of the company, of the brand, it's growth of the people. It's are they developing? It's growth of their ambition and their sense of possibility. There's a great scene in Invictus, which is a film about Nelson Mandela and the Rugby World Cup that South Africa won. Matt Damon stars as Francois Pienaar, who's the head of the captain of the Springboks team. And Francois Pienaar goes to see Mandela in this scene. And Mandela asks Francois Pienaar, "What's your understanding of leadership, Francois?" And he says, "Well, leading by example, leading by example." And then Mandela says, "Oh, yes, very important. But also, how do we get people to believe that they can be better than they think they are?" In other words, getting beyond self-limiting beliefs that I'm just a receptionist, I'm just a marketing executive, I'm just a salesperson. It's the just thing that's problematic. So a leader has to instill a sense of ambition, I think, in people, that they can actually be better than they thought they could be. So that's another aspect of growth.
Yeah, that's so true what you've just said there. And I think people have that self-imposter syndrome. And I think a good, manager / leader, could really bring that somebody out of their shell.
I think so. Can I recommend something to your listeners and viewers as well?
Yes,
because you've just triggered a thought there about the imposter syndrome. There's a YouTube series called The School of Life.
The School of Life.
Yeah. Okay. And it's a series of short video clips by Alain de Botton, who's sort of
fantastic
philosopher and speaker and writer.
Work. Yeah, I'll put a link on this YouTube, on the YouTube video when we post it.
So that one of the hundreds and hundreds of clips on the School of Life is about imposter syndrome and about why we have it. And imposter syndrome, if people aren't familiar with it, is this idea that when you rise to maybe some position of authority or seniority, there's this sense that maybe you don't deserve it, you're not good enough, you'll be found out to be wanting and a bit of a fraud. That I'm really, this is beyond me, but they've given me the position, so I'll have to sort of act as if I can do it. But underneath, I'm thinking, I'm not really up to this. This isn't me. And it's a very common feeling. And one of the things that it says in the video clip is that the reason we tend to have it, or one of the reasons we have it, is that we have a unique access to our own anxieties in our heads. We can hear that voice all the time because we have access to it, but we don't have access to other people's inner voices because only they can hear their inner voice. So we assume that they're strong and confident and that we're not because we can hear our voice. And yet they're probably hearing the same voice in their heads as well. But we don't know that. We assume that they are somehow better, stronger, able to do what they do because they deserve it. And yet we don't. But we don't hear what anxieties they have in their head. And they probably have the same ones.
That's so true. Yeah, I mean, his work is fantastic. I'll share that link with our viewers. One final question, actually, Andrea. I want to know, what was your first job? What was your first job? It could be, as in, were you paper round? It could have been working. Tell me about your first job.
Well, I can't remember that far back because I'm very ancient now, so I can't remember paper rounds. But I do remember when I was at university, I had a little part-time job working in a salad dressing factory.
A salad dressing factory.
Yeah, I think it was called Beswick's. It was in North Manchester or Northeast Manchester somewhere, and it was like a summer job or a holiday job.
Yeah.
And I lasted half a day
Okay.
because it was a lovely day. And I looked at it and thought, I really should be on the golf course because that's my life was golf before this. So I had
Yeah.
very little resolve and just gave up after half a day, much to the disgust of the other students who were sticking it out longer than I did. But my first proper job really was in the
Yeah.
golf industry. I used to work for the Professional Golfers Association, the PGA, in the Midlands. So my first proper sort of career step was to be a professional referee and a tournament director because my brother's a golf pro and I learned golf and used to teach golf for a living and worked in the industry for 22 years. So that was really my first proper career job.
What's your brother's name? He's a golf pro.
Oh no, he's not a tour pro. You won't have heard of him. His name's David Thorp. He was a club professional, so not a high profile golf pro, but he was always a hero of mine in the sense of him being 10 years older than me. And he played in the Open Golf Championship a few times, and I caddied for him as a kid. So I was very influenced by that. And that's why my career initially was in that industry. And then I switched direction about 12 years ago to do what I do now.
Brilliant. And then this is my final question to you. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be? What advice would you give to your younger self?
I think that the younger generation now are going to be facing a different type of career prospect than I had when I was younger. Because in my day, you used to have a career and you'd stay in it for a long time. But I think these days, younger people have to expect that they're going to have many, many different jobs and often jump careers several times. So I wish I had made more of my sort of interpersonal skills development and placing value on that as a younger person, because that gives you the flexibility and the adaptability to build relationships wherever you go. And I only really learned that and twigged about how important it was probably in my 40s, when I started moving into this sort of field. So it would really be to value the development of your broader self and not be too narrowly focused on a technical profession.
Wonderful. This has been a fantastic discussion, Andrew. Really appreciate your time, and I think our viewers will be extremely interested to hear what we've discussed today. So I do thank you very much for your time.
No, it's very nice to be asked. Thank you, Ches.
Yeah, and we'll have to think of a next series. I'd like to, we can think of another topic. So,
exactly. Well, maybe your viewers will want to know how to improve their golf swing, so maybe we'll talk about that next time.
Yes.
I don't know whether I can do that online very well. You just do that and then do that.
Yes, possibly. But yes, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.